Dental Fuel, the podcast that focuses on what no one else is talking about: mistakes. The dental world is full of before and afters, and no one is talking about the middle. Dental Fuel brings you the unspoken in-between. Dental Fuel is brought to you by Ignite DDS Masterminds. Masterminds is a program that helps provide you the tools you need to take the next steps in your career. This episode, we have Irene Iancu, a Canadian hygienist and owner of a successful dental practice in Toronto called Toothlife Studio. She hosts the Tooth or Dare podcast and shares her story on Instagram at toothlife.irene. In this first episode, Irene shares a clinical mistake she made with Icon. Let's get into the episode. Irene Iancu, welcome to Dental Fuel. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be speaking with you today and for you to be telling us a little bit about yourself and to share some of your mistakes as well. But please tell me, our listeners, where are you coming to us from?
Yeah, so I'm a restorative dental hygienist in Toronto, Canada. So I am up north. You're in Texas, right?
I'm in Texas, yeah.
So
we're on opposite ends here.
Far up north. I've been practicing dental hygiene for 16 years. I'm currently a restorative dental hygienist, which means I get to do a little bit more than your standard hygiene visits. And in 2020, I opened up my own practice. So yes, here in Canada, certain provinces, just like in the United States, certain states allow dental hygienists to open their own practices. So that is me. That is where I am.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what exactly you do as a restorative hygienist?
Yeah, so I can do everything except prep and anesthetize. So the workflow would look like, dentist identifies decay on a radiograph. Dentist would prep the tooth, and then I would take the tooth from preparation all the way to the end to its final state, and whatever that may be. It could be a direct or indirect restoration, a fixed or removable, whatever that might look like. So I do all of the back end work.
So you employ a dentist in your office?
Employee is a strong word.
Yeah,
so,
sure. Yes, that is. You're right.
Yeah, employee is a very strong word. I think even in a general associateship kind of agreement with a dentist, they're not an employee. But I do have a full-time dentist who operates and practices dentistry in my practice.
Very cool. Yeah. And how did you come to the decision that owning a practice was right for you?
I've seen a lot of stuff. So in my history, I started dental hygiene in 2007 when I graduated, and I went and I worked for a periodontist. So I was there for about 4 years. Here, they're called non-surgical periodontal therapists, which means we basically are able to do scaling and root planing supervised during a flap procedure or in more kind of delicate cases. So I did that for 4 years, and I thought that would scratch the itch of, working somewhere really unique. And I decided I wanted to try something different. So I worked in a pedo office for a little while, and I loved pediatric dentistry. I only love it in small increments, though.
That's right.
So I left that practice, and here in the province of Ontario, hygienists are able to also do orthodontic treatment, similar to in the United States, I guess. More assistants are the ones that are banding brackets and removing and bending wires. So here, assistants can't do that, but hygienists can. So I did that. I worked in an ortho practice for a while, really loved seeing the transformative dentistry. And then ultimately, I found my place in a cosmetic practice that did a lot of full arch cases. That was really cool. Added that to my repertoire. And finally found myself working in a holistic practice, which has a very different approach, but encompassed a lot of the different elements of all of the other practices that I worked in. The management of that practice wasn't great. And as a very efficient person, I found stress in inefficiencies. So that was something that I wanted to kind of alleviate. And in the end, I thought if I couldn't find that unicorn practice, I would just create it myself. And that is where we are now.
Sometimes you just got to do it yourself.
Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah.
Irene, before we get into the nitty gritty, I know that you're doing a lot of cool things just in general and in life and in social media in particular, especially with your podcasts. Will you talk a little bit about how you got into that and kind of what your passions are with that?
Sure. Yeah, that was probably a 2017 Irene. I remember that year quite vividly because it was the year I decided to start teaching. I started teaching at my alma mater as a dental hygiene theory and kind of clinical or technical instructor. And then I was scouted by a company, a third-party company that was hired by Invisalign to create a lot of their educational content that some of still is living, in perpetuity on their platforms. So I was hired by Invisalign to kind of travel North America, Canada, and North America, deliver educational content on the connection between dental hygiene and clear aligner therapy and what those consequences to poor tooth positioning are. Now, that is kind of where I started sharing my story on social media and on Instagram. And within, a few years, that number rose from 0 followers to 30 to, almost 30,000 now. And it was just this kind of journey in the evolution of my career that I shared with my followers, and kind of my nerdy side, like some of the science stuff and the self-experiments that I conduct. It's like a toned down version of Nate Lawson, minus having a school behind me to help with the research. So yeah, it was kind of just a slow progression and evolution. And the podcast came around the same time, 2018, 2019. There were no Canadian dental hygienists at the time with a podcast, and our marketing guidelines here are very strict and very different than they are in the United States. Like, for example, I could never promote product to the general public. I could never, be a Figs ambassador to the world. Yeah, their guidelines are quite strict. So I thought, okay, well, there's nobody doing it, and it's probably just because they don't know how to do it. So let me try. And that was where we began. So I started with a podcast co-host who is a pretty popular YouTuber. Her name is Whitney. She goes by Teeth Talk Girl. So we were co-hosts for a year, and then I had another co-host after that. And in most recent year, it's just me solo. And I kind of like it. I feel like I have a little bit more control and fluidity in what I'm able to do. And scheduling is not nearly as much of a nightmare. But
once you add that third person to the mix, it's the
Calendly links and I'm running behind and all of that stuff. I mean, it's natural. It happens, but I really enjoy it. And I enjoy doing live podcasts, like at trade shows. I feel like you really get to know someone a little bit better in real life than you do like, this over Zoom. Although this is nice and in the comfort of my own living room.
Next time I'm going to come there. I'll come to Canada.
Come on over. We can do it from the couch.
I saw you at Voices of Dentistry, and you'll be at SmileCon. Is that correct?
I will be at SmileCon, and probably Voices of. I don't know if Voices of Dentistry is happening again, but
I don't know. Yeah,
but yeah, I definitely. If it does happen again, I will be there. But I will be at SmileCon. Yeah, I'm doing a main stage podcast interview on Thursday. I think actually David might be my guest, so we'll see.
Cool. Well, I'll be around. I'm going to take some gear and kind of set up. But I love the headsets that you all use. I think it's so cool, and I feel like it's probably better than carrying mics around. But
they remind me of being on like a NFL field.
Yeah. I think NASCAR every time I see them.
That's too funny.
That's just me kind of geeking out here and being a fan. But here at Dental Fuel, we are dedicated to talking about people's mistakes, learning from mistakes, and kind of growing together, gaining pearls, and kind of using those pearls to kind of advance ourselves in the profession. And we all make a ton of mistakes. But I would love to know a clinical mistake that you've made and how you grew from it.
I've made so many.
Yep.
So Icon Resin Infiltration is an unfilled resin product, proprietary to DMG, but there are like DIY versions of it that I've done myself. And, a white spot is not just a white spot lesion. It's, there's complexities and there's severities and there's different reasons why someone would have it, either developmental or fluorosis or a variety of other reasons. And unfortunately, you open up this perfect box that has these 6 boxes of instructions, and it's like step 1 through 6, do all of these things, and then you're expecting this miraculous result to happen at the very end. And then my phone gets blown up because it's like I did it and it didn't look that way, and it's not cookie cutter or linear in any way. So I guess one of my biggest lessons learned as a practice owner clinically is how to really set somebody up for a low expectation in order for you to develop and provide a higher level of what that expectation, like the reality of it, and then still get consent to do treatment. Because if you set someone up to say, well, it could do nothing, then they're going to be like, well, I'm not going to do anything at all. So I guess I was very hopeful with my very first Icon patient in my own practice. So I've performed this procedure before, but it's different when, you know, your name's on the door and you sign the checks versus somebody else handles the fallout of what happens with a patient who is perhaps displeased. So I did this procedure, simple, straightforward, it seemed, you know, 4 anterior upper teeth, lateral to lateral, had a kind of unique white spot pattern. It looked like a semicircle on all of the teeth, like if you were to chop a circle in half, and it was from the incisal edge, and it kind of just extended up. And I was like, okay, well, they don't seem too deep. And I performed the procedure, and I didn't look at the lingual aspect of the tooth or of the intraoral photos that we had already taken. And normally I have those up on a screen, but I don't know why. I just thought it was just a simple case. And then I realized that because of the thickness of the tooth, having minimal thickness, the tooth didn't end up looking better. It ended up looking worse. So I ended up having this, and resin infiltration does this like refractory thing with light, where light will, it's supposed to reflect a lighter color, but in this case, the lesion was so deep and the enamel was so thin that it refracted a yellowish to kind of orange tone of the tooth. So the white spots were gone, but now the tooth is a little bit more brown. And had I looked at the lingual of those photos, had I like not been so cocky that I've done this 1,000 times and doing it in my own brand new office, had I just like taken a step back and looked at those like details, then perhaps I wouldn't have had to have those teeth bonded, and then the bonding didn't match, and then they had to be prepped, and then they had to be restored again. And I mean, the patient was chill. She was cool. She's like, she knew that, you know, it wasn't going to be perfect, but I think in my mind it was. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is check your ego. Because even if you've done it 1,000 times, it's the 1,001 that you can still make that mistake, and follow like the checklist, you know?
Yeah, icon can be tricky. I think that, you know, there are certain cases that are a home run, and there are certain cases that you're like, well, should I repeat this 80 more times? Will it change? I don't know. It can be tricky.
Yeah, I did one on Monday, and I was like, okay, so I've etched 3 times. I've etched 3 times at 4 minutes-ish. I've infiltrated twice at 10 minutes-ish. It's time. Like,
I've been there.
It's Grey's Anatomy, like, time of death, 4:33 p.m.
Yeah.
All right.
I totally get that.
Get the body shade.
Yeah. Let's start filling.
Yeah.
Irene, I want to take it a step back for hygienists in hygiene school in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Are you all taught restorative dentistry as a standard, or is this kind of like an add-on?
No, it's a post-grad. Yeah,
it's a post-grad. Okay.
Yeah, it's a post. So you need to be a registered dental hygienist, and each program will have a different prerequisite of how many years you need to be practicing for. Class sizes are super small, super selective. So there aren't many of us. I think there's like 34,000 hygienists in the province of Ontario, and perhaps like 1,200 restorative hygienists. It's a really small number. Quite competitive, and no, you don't graduate with it. And I think in some states in the United States do, like I know in Arizona, you graduate with an expanded functions component. Yeah. So every place is different, but across the board in Canada, it's a secondary designation. Now I can do, most hygienists can do temporary restorations coming out of school. Like we call it interim stabilization, like, you know, a glass ionomer or, you know, something of that sort, but not a permanent restoration.
Do other hygienists own practices in Canada?
Yeah, there are many. They, you know, look and feel different. Some run mobile clinics. Like my best friend is really cool. She runs a mobile clinic, and not like a mobile clinic as in like one chair, like multiple chairs, multiple units. And she primarily focuses on elder care. So she'll like set up a whole day in a retirement home, times like 100. She's got like hundreds of homes that she operates.
That's great. That's needed everywhere.
Yeah, like some have brick and mortar storefronts, like mine, front facing to the public. It looks just like a dental office. Others have hygiene clinics where they'll perform strictly dental hygiene services. So they all look a little different, but I think mine is just, I don't know, I'm just the loudest one, maybe. I talk a lot.
Loud is good. I think
I
that's
mean,
fine.
hey.
Yeah.
Business is business, right?
That's right. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Dental Fuel. Join us next week as we talk about a financial mistake Irene has made. You can follow Irene on her Instagram at toothlife.irene. You can also follow us on Instagram at Dental Fuel and at IgniteDDS. Learn more about Ignite Dental Masterminds at ignitedds.com/masterminds.